Good evening. Tonight, I'm going to tell you the story of unrequited love. A love that a god felt for a female who did not wish to reciprocate it. But before we begin our story, let's settle down for a relaxing half hour. Take a few seconds to calm your breathing. Allow your body to sink deeply into your mattress. Now, take a few deep breaths as you lie down, inhaling and exhaling, feeling your heart rate slow down, settling while any thoughts of the day also subside. As you feel those thoughts slipping away, simply let them go. Just lay any burdens aside, any other anxieties that have been crowding your mind. Now, imagine that you are in ancient Greece, a land between the sky and sea, a land where stories hold the key to our past and also to our future, a place where there are hundreds of stories to hear and to tell. There, the sun shines high, the wind is cool, and many sailboats grace the waters as they journey around the islands, islets, coves, and bays. You, too, would surely like a trip to this historical land. And so, you relax as you listen to this story. Are you ready? Now then, let's begin. This story takes place long ago in ancient times when humans, gods, goddesses, nymphs, and magical creatures roamed the earth. It was an era when the light of the sun was embodied by the great god Apollo, and the glow of the moon illuminated the night under the care of his counterpart, the goddess Selene. Apollo, the god of light and son of Zeus, had one significant duty: to drive a four-horse chariot across the sky, bringing light to all men, women, children, and living things. Each day, he would rise from one end of the earth and journey to the other, watching as the world awakened beneath him. You must understand that Apollo wielded immense power. His sunlight nurtured the growth of plants and trees, providing energy and life to all things. Without him, nothing could flourish as abundantly. Because of his grandeur, he was adored by many maidens. Throughout his existence, Apollo fathered many children and had numerous lovers. The goddesses admired him, sought his affection, and yearned for his embrace. Even mortal women gazed up at the sky, captivated by his warmth and strength. However, Apollo never took a wife, though he had many lovers. But this story is about the first woman to truly bewitch him before anyone else could claim his heart. She was also his most famous love. Her name was Daphne, daughter of Peneus, the river god. Daphne was a nymph, a beautiful, sprightly, and enchanting creature who lived among the sparkling ripples and flowing waves of the water. Nymphs were not quite human, nor were they fully goddesses, perhaps minor deities. In a sense, they existed in great numbers, scattered across the earth, wherever nature thrived, among trees, in caves, along beaches, or across meadows. Nymphs gathered, tending to the world around them. These ethereal beings were responsible for caring for the plants and animals of their realms, protecting the life that grew freely and filling the world with vibrant energy. Many different types of nymphs existed, each with their own sacred domain. For instance, the flower nymphs lived nestled between the petals of blossoms. The breeze nymphs drifted on wisps of cooling winds, following their father, the wind god. Some nymphs, known as naiads, chose water as their eternal companion and dwelled within fountains, rivers, and springs. The tree nymphs, called dryads, resided within towering pines and ancient oaks, hidden among branches and leaves. Meanwhile, The sand nymphs made their homes along rocky shores and shell-covered beaches, gracing the tides as the ocean ebbed and flowed in endless rhythm. There were many other kinds of nymphs, too many to name them all. What mattered most was that they were exquisite, graceful beings, and their very existence shaped the beauty of the earth itself. Daphne was a naiad, a guardian of the waters. Her ethereal beauty reflected both the restlessness and serenity of the rivers she tended. As she moved along the water's edge, she directed its flow in countless directions, spreading life, elegance, and reflections of the sun wherever the river journeyed. One day, as Apollo raised his chariot high into the sky, he glimpsed his own reflection shimmering upon the river's surface. As he followed the image, he noticed a mesmerizing figure, one responsible for keeping his water pure and flowing. There she was, her long hair dancing in the currents, her bare limbs kissed by sunlight, glistening like diamonds upon the water's surface. The sight of her was irresistible. Apollo had heard whispers of Daphne's beauty before, spoken by gods and mortals alike. Yet, until that moment, he had never seen her with his own eyes. It took only an instant for him to realize that she was the most beautiful being he had ever encountered. He could not look away, even as duty called him to continue his journey across the sky. He found himself unable to cast her from his thoughts. As the day wore on, his chariot blazed across the heavens, but his mind remained fixated on the enchanting nymph. When night arrived, and the western wind cooled his chariot's wheels, Apollo still could not forget her. Daphne had captivated him unlike any other. His heart, once untouched by such longing, now burned with desire. He sought the wisdom of his divine companions, hoping to learn more about this elusive nymph. His friends warned him of her nature. Daphne is unlike the others, they told him. She does not wish for marriage, neither with man nor God. Her devotion lies in the care of her waters, and no one, not even you, Apollo, can distract her from her sacred duty. Apollo, confident in his charm and power, believed otherwise. Surely, no maiden, mortal or divine, could resist him forever. So, day after day, as his chariot passed above her river, he called out to her, seeking her gaze. But Daphne remained indifferent, swimming gracefully in her waters, paying him no mind. One day, unable to bear his longing any longer, Apollo descended, determined to win her heart. He spoke to her, his voice rich and persuasive. "Daphne, do you not desire to ride with me in my chariot of fire? To join me in the heavens, where you would shine as brightly as the stars?" Daphne did not respond. She continued to glide through the river, ignoring him entirely. Her silence only deepened Apollo's infatuation. He resolved to make her see him, to make her understand the depth of his love. But Daphne had no interest in his affections. She had already made her choice. She would remain as she was, wild, free, and untouched by love. Apollo had heard the other gods and creatures speak of Daphne and her beauty before, but this was the first time he saw her with his own eyes. He needed not even a full minute to decide that she was the most beautiful creature he had ever seen. He could hardly tear his eyes away from her, but duty called, and as the day wore on, he sped his chariot across the sky, from one end of the earth to the other, all the while thinking of this nymph he had seen, unable to get her out of his mind. When Apollo consulted his friends, they told him what he hadn't known before. Daphne was a peculiar creature, and he should be aware of this. She did not desire to marry any man or god. She was a nymph committed to her work, to caring for the water. There was no human nor god alive who could distract her from her daily tasks. "Trust us," We've all tried before, they admonished Apollo. The truth was that Daphne admired Diana, the moon goddess. Diana was said to be pure and chaste while serving the universe, as was her duty. And Daphne wanted to be just like her. She did not want to marry anyone and become committed to anybody, be he a man or a god. Well, as you can imagine, Apollo did not think this to be much of a challenge. The next day, as his chariot passed over her river, Apollo called out to her. Daphne gazed up at the sun god. Showing off again, she said to herself. She continued swimming, continued ignoring him. Again, Apollo called out to the young nymph. Daphne, don't you desire to ride with me in my chariot of fire? He asked. But she paid no attention to him. Apollo tried to get Daphne to look at him day after day, but she could not be convinced. Finally, he decided to look for Eros, the god also known as Cupid. His arrows, when shot into the heart of any creature, would pierce them with love and desire. This was Eros's daily activity, and surely he could help Apollo out here, the sun god thought to himself. However, Apollo could not help but laugh when he found Eros and saw him playing with his bows and arrows as if they were great hunting weapons. Apollo felt proud of his own powers, which could not even stand comparison to Eros's single arrow trick. He swooped on over to the god of desire and gave a little laugh. Why do you play with weapons of war? They are probably better off in the hands of someone who knows how to wield real weapons, taunted Apollo. Hand them over, and maybe you should play with kindle flames instead. Eros was not amused. Apollo thought quite mightily of himself, and he was indeed powerful. But that was no reason to make fun of the other gods or their duties. Strike everything else you want with your great arrows, Apollo, he called back, and leave mine alone, lest they strike your heart. Apollo laughed and was about to tell him that he did indeed need one or two of his arrows for Daphne's young heart. However, before the sun god could get any closer, here's what the god of desire, Eros, did. He carefully chose 2 arrows from his full quiver. One was a golden arrow. It was very sharp and gleamed in the light that shone down from Apollo's being. This one he held carefully, fitted on his bow, pulled back the string until it was tight enough, and then pointed it straight at Apollo's heart. Upon release, the arrow flew through the air and hit its target. The sun god was smitten as he looked down on Daphne. If it was love that filled his heart in days past, now it was a desire so strong that nothing else could compare. But Eros was not finished yet. He had planned a second arrow, a very, very blunt one, this time tipped with lead. This one he adjusted to shoot straight to the heart of Daphne. Those who knew Eros and his ways understood that arrows tipped with lead did the opposite of love. They repelled. Whoever was struck by these arrows would also be struck with hatred for the one who loved them, and they would be immune to all the so-called weaknesses that love sometimes brings. Now, you must remember that when this story took place, Apollo was still a youth. He had never been in love before, and as we all know, falling in love for the first time is an experience unlike any other. Now, Apollo's first love was consuming his heart and mind the way the sea consumes the sand when the moon's tide carries the water back to the shore. All day long, as he drove his chariot, he could think of nothing but the beautiful Daphne. His wheels were on fire, and so was his heart. When night came, and the western wind cooled the chariot, he still could not put her out of his mind. Daphne was the theme of his dreams. She ruled his thoughts as if a nymph could ever overpower a god. She never fell in love with Apollo, for the arrow that pierced her heart was the one tipped with lead. Whenever he passed above her, she felt repulsed. She hated him. She despised him and wished he would disappear forever. Of course, she also knew that without the light of the sun, darkness might overwhelm the world. And so, if he must love her, then let him love her from a distance. She would not give in. Daphne was determined to stay as pure as the moon goddess, Diana, whom she still adored. One day, Apollo could not stay away from the object of his love any longer. He followed Daphne as she flitted through the grass. It was a beautiful spring day. Flowers blossomed around Daphne's feet. Little birds fluttered down to sit on her shoulders as she walked barefoot in the wet grass. Apollo thought to himself that it looked as if the grass beneath her feet shimmered in golden showers. The white-hot flames of his chariot shone down like a spotlight on her, making the sparkles around her glow like an aura of beauty. He was mesmerized. Apollo came lower to touch her. He wanted to kiss her soft lips, feel her skin, caress her hair, and lie down with her in that golden grass. But before he could approach her, Daphne heard him moving and spun around. "Keep your distance, Apollo," she warned him. "Come now." "Daphne," protested the sun god, "I am not your enemy but your lover. I bow to you and you alone. I might conquer all others on earth, but you have conquered my heart, and I only wish to worship you, to kiss you." He moved forward to grasp her hair. But as Daphne heard these words, she began to run and run and run. The more afraid she grew, the faster she ran. She was spurred on by the fear in her heart, just as Apollo was spurred on by love. As he started to chase her, she sped on, her heart racing, her hair blowing in the wind. He followed her close, his chariot gaining speed, his wings on fire. Daphne could feel Apollo's heart close behind her. She picked up her feet and ran faster. 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 But then, the nymph of the water realized that she could never, ever outrun the sun. She was nearly at the banks of the river ruled by her father, Phineas. She did not stop until her feet touched the water. And then she cried out, "Father, help me. Save me from Apollo." She was calling out to the river god, her father, Phineas. In that fateful moment, Phineas heard her cry. He looked to see that his daughter was being overcome by a being more powerful than other gods. And if it was love that was spurring him on, then his power would be even more invincible. He knew what he had to do to save his daughter. No longer would she be the unbound, carefree nymph she had been before. No longer could she roam the forests, swim in the rivers, or go wherever she pleased. He would change her into a different creature. This way, she would not be overcome by Apollo. He would turn her into a laurel tree. It was a tough decision for any father to make, but Phineas knew it was for his daughter's own good. As Apollo came nearer, he reached out to grasp Daphne's arm. With the other, he clasped her waist to pull her toward him. Suddenly, the skin of her flesh started to dry up and darken, the color of bark. Apollo thought she had stopped and was about to turn to face him when he saw roots sprouting from her long, nimble legs, digging into the earth and anchoring her to the soil. He looked into Daphne's eyes and saw a mixture of anxiety and relief. As he gazed at her face, he saw it morphing beyond recognition. Her long, flowing blonde hair, those strands he had come to love and saw as jewels, began to rise wildly in the wind, reaching up to the sky. He watched as her hair continued to blow and transform, taking on the shape of leaves and branches. Apollo did not know what was happening to his beloved Daphne. A magical, mystical transformation was occurring, but he did not know its source or how it was happening. As he stood looking at her, now frozen, he thought he could hear her voice. even through her pursed and immobile lips. I could never love you, Apollo. Not in the way that you love me. I am the child of the earth, and forever here, connected to the earth. I will now stay. Apollo cried out in fear at these words. He took a step backward and gazed in astonishment. For now, he saw that the young nymph had completely changed. She was no longer a girl, but a tree, a laurel tree with deep green leaves, steady branches, and roots firmly planted in the earth. He reached out to touch her, but she was no longer as supple as before. Woody branches now stuck out, poking at his fingers. Even so, he moved forward to embrace her. Despite everything, he still saw beauty in that earthen tree. Those deep green leaves were as enchanting as Daphne herself. He reached out, plucking a few leaves and branches, and shaped them into a crown. He placed it on his own head. Very well, Daphne. Since you cannot be my bride, at least you shall be my tree. You are my laurel one. I shall wear you always in my hair and think of you all day long, for every day to come. Daphne could hear Apollo as he spoke these words. But now, a deep calm and peace had filled her heart. Her father had heard her cries and had given her the chance to continue living near the earth she loved so much. She would never have to wait for any man, mortal or god, to claim her, nor would she ever be touched in a way she did not desire. In her mind, Daphne was free. She might be forever rooted to the soil. She might not have the freedom to move as she once did, but this was the kind of freedom she had always longed for. No other creature could ever own her. She could finally be like the moon, an object all men admired, but one no one had ever enslaved. She could finally live in the light of her heroine, Diana. Apollo was forced to continue with his day and his existence. Yes, he found other maidens to love, even other goddesses, but he never forgot his first love, Daphne. From that day on, Apollo always wore a wreath of laurel leaves in his hair. On Mount Olympus, those who had completed a mission worthy of the gods' honor were also crowned with laurel. It became a symbol of beauty and victory. Even today, people around the world speak of the laurel's significance. It should also be noted that from that moment on, all living beings thought twice before mocking the god of desire, Eros. Apollo's mistake served as a lesson for everyone. In ancient Greece, every 4 years, a laurel wreath was awarded to the victor of the Pythian Games, a competition held in honor of Apollo, the sun god. Thank you for joining me for this story on Golden Slumbers. I hope that when you find your true love, it will be returned to you in the way you desire. Good night, sweet dreams, and until next time.